Joining me today is Jacqueline Friedland, author of Counting Backwards. A routine immigration case, a shocking legacy, Jessa Gidney's quest for justice draws her into the heart of an abhorrent conspiracy. As she uncovers her personal ties to a heartbreaking past, her life takes a dramatic turn in this emotionally riveting novel inspired by true events. Alternating between the past and present and deftly tackling timely yet timeless issues such as reproductive rights, incarceration, and society's expectations of women and mothers, Jacqueline Friedland brings us a compelling reminder that progress is rarely a straight line and always hard won. A moving story of two remarkable women that you'll remember for years to come. Jacqueline is an Amazon and USA Today bestselling author and a magna cum laude graduate from UPenn and NYU Law School. Welcome to the show, Jacqueline.
Hi, Kathryn. Thank you so much for having me on.
I'm impressed by the book, but I have to say I am really impressed by the magna cum laude from, if you want to know, from you, yeah, from Penn and law school. So, uh, first question is, what made you decide? And you taught at law school, Benjamin Cardozo School of Law. You're a lawyer, but then you decided, and I'm not sure exactly when, but to just focus on writing full time. How did you come to that decision?
So, the honest truth is that I never wanted to be a lawyer. I was in college as an English major, nearing the end of my junior year, and I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And I went to see my favorite English professor, and I told him that I was thinking about maybe applying to get a PhD in English and become a professor like him. And he very quickly talked me out of it. And he told me, he was an older man and he was nearing retirement. And he gave me the whole speech about, it's not the way it used to be. And he told me that if I became a professor, much of my job would be focused on trying to get tenure and trying to get scholarly articles published. And that if my goal was just to be in a classroom focused on books, it wasn't really going to meet my desires or expectations. So after extensive discussion with my parents, they said, go to law school. When you finish, you'll be qualified to do anything. And I said, okay, fine. And off I went to law school. And the truth is, I loved law school and I found the law really fascinating. But then I followed this standard path of going into a big commercial litigation firm afterwards. And from day one of being in the office, it was sort of, oh my goodness, how did I get here? It was never the dream. The dream was always writing. And I did end up, after a few years of practice, going to teach in law school. At the course I taught was called Legal Writing and Lawyering Skills, which I thought might bridge the gap between law and writing, and it might sort of satisfy my urges, but it did not. And so when I got pregnant with my fourth child in 6 years, my sister said to me, I don't know how you think you're going to manage to be a full-time attorney and a full-time mom, and you have all these little kids. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to take this time and go back to school and get my master's in creative writing, and maybe I can pivot and have a whole new career as a writer. And that is exactly what I did. And I have not looked back for a single second.
Okay, I just want to take you back just a couple sentences because you kind of you didn't gloss over it, but like your sister said, you can't be a full-time lawyer with 4 kids. However, you did go back, get a master's degree, and pursue writing novels. So how'd you do that with the 4 kids? I mean, women do want to hear that. Like, what?
Yes.
Yeah, how'd you manage that?
Well, when I went back to school, I did the program part-time, so I was largely available for my kids. And I also thankfully had relatively well-behaved children who would allow me time to write. I would take them to soccer and be sitting on the sides
Yeah.
with my laptop. I sort of snuck it in wherever I could. And finally, when my youngest daughter started kindergarten, that was when I managed to publish my first book, because that was once they were all in a full day of school, that was when I finally had the time available to myself to really put in the hours with the writing.
So you're a high energy person. I mean, right? I mean, I'm
Sometimes.
assuming. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you have to be able to do that no matter what. Even if the kids are well behaved, there's still 4 of them and they're young.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, but you were able to do that. I mean, that is, that's remarkable, actually. And as I said in the intro to your book, Counting Backwards, it's a moving story of two remarkable women that we will remember for years to come. So, we don't want to go through the whole novel, obviously, but who are these two women and why are they so remarkable? Or is one of them or both of them like you?
Huh. Well, so the novel is dual timeline, and the elevator pitch for the novel is that it's based on the true story from 2020 of incarcerated immigrants who were claiming that they were being sterilized against their wishes. And the book tells the story of a fictionalized attorney who takes on the case for these women and, pursues a class action, and how the fight for women's rights changes all of their lives. So that character, the young attorney, is Jessa Gidney. And she and I have some things in common in that we have experience working as lawyers in New York City and having some angst about our jobs. And I did, when I was working as a lawyer, I did do some pro bono immigration work on the side. But my other timeline, it goes back to a real Supreme Court case from the 1920s, where a young woman named Carrie Buck was also sterilized against her wishes. And that was because she had been deemed what they called at the time feeble-minded. And it was during the eugenics craze in America, and the Supreme Court thought it made wonderful sense that they should, of course, sterilize her because that would prevent her from having any children who were just like she was. So Carrie is a real character, and she and I thankfully have very little in common. She was a foster kid. She was uneducated. She stopped school after sixth grade. She was institutionalized. She never had any children. So, but she was a real person who I based her character on.
Okay, because the character, when we're flash forward to Jessa in 2022, this is a woman who wants to have it all, right? Which job, good marriage, having a baby, all of those kinds of things, but at the same time having a successful career. So she reminds me of you. And
Uh,
yeah, or as you described, your career and how you, I guess, manage it, which I'm really interested in because, okay, let's talk about now. Where are you now after you finish this book? What's first of all, what's the response from your family? I don't know how old the kids are now, but in to the novel, to your book.
so the kids have been awesome about the book. They're now much older. I have two are in college and one in high school and one in middle school. And they they were there around the dinner table from the first inception when I began talking about it. And they always weigh in with their opinions of, the politics surrounding
Mhm.
it and the women's rights issues. And they are big fans. They post for me on Instagram, which I feel is the ultimate
Yeah,
compliment coming
yeah,
from teenagers, right?
right, right. Women's rights. Let's talk about women's rights and how this book fits into women's rights where we are right now, or where we're not. Where are we, and how? Yeah.
So it's funny, when you write a book, it's a long time from when you first sit down to start page one to when the book actually comes out. Because, even say it takes you approximately a year to write the book, and then once you're finished with that, it takes the publisher also approximately a year to, get it formatted and do the cover design and get it edited and all of that business. So when I started this book, I imagined that the relevant issues, which I think would be women's rights and immigration, which were sort of, dominating the headlines at the time, I figured by the time the book came out, they hopefully would not be such front and center news because maybe some things would have been resolved. But turns out
Yeah.
we've gone in the opposite direction, and these issues are, more prevalent than ever. But one thing I will say about this book that I think is important to note that it talks about, the description includes reproductive rights and women's rights, which I think leads everybody to think that this is a book that is about abortion in some way. And it actually has nothing to do with abortion. I think the word abortion, it doesn't even come up in the book at all. It's about women's rights to reproduce, which is not something that people really think about because we assume certain rights are just safeguarded and no one would ever touch them or take them. But within that right to reproduce, there's also the right to adequate medical care and, informed, doctors giving patients information and the right to bodily autonomy and getting to make choices for yourself. And those able to tackle them in this novel because while I don't want to tell anybody what to think, I do want to share information and have people thinking about the issues so they can decide for themselves. So that was a big motivation behind this book.
So you're talking about awareness, really. As you say, you don't want to tell people what to
Exactly.
do or how they should do it, but we all need to be aware, not just women and men, all of us. But let's take that. Okay, so now we become more aware through your book and others. What do we do?
What do we do? We make sure to keep reading the news from multiple sources, so we're doing our best to get accurate information. We make sure to keep talking to people, and we also make sure to stay engaged politically. I think the most important thing to do is vote and to be aware of the policies of the people that you are voting for or that you have the option to vote for. I think there's a tendency in this country not to vote in like smaller elections, and those small elections, for positions you may never have even heard of or thought about, those are the people who end up getting the bigger positions later, and they are the ones who end up shaping the laws and policy. And if you don't follow along and stay engaged throughout the process, you may end up with situations you're very unhappy about in the future.
Yeah, I think the media also is somewhat responsible for that. The media talks a lot about, the big picture, presidents and even senators, but not necessarily, as you say, local politics and making people aware of who they can vote for in their
Yes.
own communities. Really,
Yes, it's like
yeah, yeah,
city council, even the school
yeah,
board, all of those positions matter.
yeah. In the last election, I think the statistic is 89 million people did not vote who are eligible to vote.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard to process that because people do care about the implications of what happens once, the whoever wins gets into office. So we have our vote, we have to use it.
Why do you think people think their vote doesn't count? I think that's still somewhat of a pervasive attitude for some reason. It doesn't really make any difference if I vote.
I think that it's so there's something about it that's so amorphous. There are the numbers of people voting, and especially like large elections, like the presidential election, feels so massive. And here we are, we're each just one person, but it does add up. And I wish people could feel more empowered that it does make a difference.
Well, you have or at least two generations in your family, and you said two kids in college. I think
Correct.
yeah. Okay. So those two kids in college come from a different generation. They're in a different context, but I'm assuming they can vote. And you sit down and talk about all these things at the dinner table. So what is their read on all of this, which I assume is different than, say, your generation?
I think they feel that they actually have a perspective that I'm quite proud of, which is basically that they are proud to be American. They feel blessed to live in this country, but they also understand that, America is not perfect. The government can make mistakes, that not everybody who's in office necessarily is somebody they think deserves to be. And I think, treat it sort of the way you would as a parent, the way you would treat a child. Like you love your child, and if your child makes a terrible mistake, you're not going to kick them out of the house and never speak to them again. Hopefully, you're going to work with them and try to change their ways and teach them what they should have been doing instead. And I think that is how my kids approach sort of everything that's going on in the country. And they do sometimes go to a rally on their college campus and try to talk to people, and I'm their wimpy mother saying like, don't get in fights, stay
Yeah.
away.
Right.
But I am glad that I think they're very aware and very engaged.
Yeah, I was going to say they sound like they're engaged and that they do feel they have some responsibility. to
Yes,
do something or to be a part of, that they don't just stand back and not be one of those people who don't vote.
correct.
Uh, right. So, okay. So you've got the two in college, four kids, one in high school,
Hmm.
and then the next one, the youngest.
Is in middle school. She is my girl after three boys.
All right. So how is that girl after three boys? I'm a family of all boys, brothers, sons, grandsons, and now I had one granddaughter,
Wow.
uh, just recently. So, that's a whole male perspective. So, yeah, I'd like to hear about that because here she is, the girl with all the boys. How's it different for her?
So she is awesome. I will say that my three boys have a lot in common in terms of their interests. So they're always going off to, talk about fantasy football or watch a sports game or things like that. And she has zero interest. So there are moments where I'm very sorry she doesn't have a sister to share in her interests with her. But they kids all get along beautifully. And I will add that, everybody told me, oh, boys are so much easier than girls. And I always used to say that's not true. But the boys, they jump off of every high
That
surface. They
is,
constantly breaking bones. They're always
yeah.
wrestling. But it's so much more physical with them. And with my daughter, she sits quietly and she doesn't make a mess, but we have deep talks, you know.
Yeah, so you're so right. There is that physicality that
Mhm.
is so. I mean, there is that there's that testosterone and the estrogen. That's what I mean. That's probably pretty simplistic, but it's there. It's true.
Yep.
The boys will,
Yep.
uh, they could use them for demolition. I mean, easily
Yes.
they could, right? Very different for the girls. But so, how do you see that in terms of as a parent in raising her? And I mean, look at you. I mean, you are uh, successful, an author, you have all these degrees as a woman. Um, how do you, and you say you sit down and you have deep conversations with your daughter, different conversations than you would have with, or did, or do with your sons.
Yes. I have to credit my mom. She's recently retired, but she was a professor of special ed and she worked really hard. She was always either at a college campus teaching or home at her desk writing and applying for grants. And she wrote textbooks and she started these programs. She was always doing. And so I grew up thinking that I was going to, there was never a day where I thought maybe I won't work as an adult. And there were I just grew up thinking I wanted to be like my mom. I wanted to have a job where I felt like I was making the world a better place, just like she did. And then that was part of why my job as a lawyer was so problematic for me. The firm that I ended up in, they were very lovely, but it was corporate. And so I was doing a lot of defending companies who were fighting against other companies. And it just didn't feel like I was making the world a better place. And I know that had I pursued a different path within the law, I could have ended up at, a nonprofit or even like a family law kind of firm where it was affecting individuals in a different way. But I didn't know how to do that. And I was young and I just, instead of trying to figure it out, I was just like, I'm out of here. And so, but my mom, what she taught me was to think that I could do anything. She always said, whatever you set your mind to, you can do it. So I never for a day thought because I'm a woman, I'm going to have a harder time professionally. And I still don't think that. I really, I don't let it hold me back in any way. And if there's some job or position or book event or whatever it may be that I want, I go for it regardless of the fact that I'm female. And it doesn't even, it's not something I even usually think about that, oh, well, I'm a woman. So, and perhaps I should think about that because I do know that it is an actual stumbling block in many situations. But my mom, I think by leading me to believe that I could do anything, having nothing to do with the gender that I was born as, I'm hoping my daughter is also taking that same message from me. And I think her brothers believe it, and we have these nice conversations. She's young enough that she every day is sort of saying, well, when I grow up, maybe I'll be this. And the next day it's something totally different. But it's never, well, but maybe I can't. She never says that. And I think that that's amazing.
Yeah. Well, you kind of, two things. I think you covered that in your book, but role models. Your mother was a role model, and you're a role model for your daughter. There are many women or young women out there who maybe don't have those role models. So
Mhm.
mentoring comes to mind, making a difference, important to connect young women with other women who are doing uh, have the same attitude or doing what you do. But in your book, you are talking about women specifically and the limitations because reproductive rights, incarceration, expectation of women and mothers really important in order to accomplish what as a woman what you want to do.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think that especially for women who want to be mothers, and it's like what I said earlier about how my sister said to me, you're never going to be able to be a full-time attorney and a full-time mom and have all these little kids. Like you can't, I do believe that while a woman can do anything, like to quote Oprah, I think she
Yeah,
said you can do anything, you just can't do it all at once.
yeah,
And I also think that that's true. And I think it requires compromise, but I also think, that's true across genders. It's different issues, but I think that, it's hard figuring out how to have a family and have a job and spend time, with your family while also spending time having a really meaningful career. And I think that that's something that we still need to work out in our society. And I think that, these issues of like childcare and how much moms are going to be home with their kids, and the fact that, when a mom travels for work, everyone says, "Oh, who's with your kids?" and
yeah.
nobody says it to the dad. Like that's all real. And I think, there's progress to be made.
Yeah, there's progress to be made, and we haven't. I mean, we have made progress, but boy, it's very slow. It's taking a long time. We don't really have, and I think this is a good point that you brought up. How do you do it? We talk about that. Yes, a woman should be able and do anything a man can do, and put your mind to it, and maybe you can do it all, but not at the same time. But actually, a how-to. Like we don't really get into okay, how do you do it given you one's a woman's particular set of circumstances? How do you really do it? I mean,
I mean, I could speak to how I do it, but I think part of why we don't have a how-to, I think, is because different people have different priorities. For example, I have some friends, women friends who have incredible jobs that require them to be out of their homes, do like meeting with clients and going to events many nights of the week, and on a regular basis. So for me, as an author, I do have many author events that I do around the time of publication, but that's only for like a couple of months out of the year, and then things quiet down a little and it'll be an event here or there. I prefer to be home with my children at night in case they need help with homework or things like that. But for somebody else who might say that's not a priority for me, and as long as I get my kids to school in the morning, that's enough for me. For me, the way I do it is I do get my kids off in the morning, and then I spend the entire time that they are in school working. And I have friends who I wish I could see more, people who say, let's have lunch, who I am constantly saying, I wish I could, but I have a deadline. Where I make my sacrifice, I think, is time with friends. And then, the kids come home at the end of the day, and I get out of my yoga pants 2 seconds before they walk in the door, and I pretend I was dressed all day,
yeah.
Um, and and then at night, if they're busy, I can be back at my desk, but I'm home and I'm in the house. And so for me, also being able to work from home has been a huge help as well.
So it's priorities. You have whatever your priorities are, you have to think about your priorities. And then you have to have somewhat of a plan. I think a lot of women get into situations, they're just chaotic and things get frenzied because they haven't really sat down and I mean, you've described your plan or the way you are able to do what you want to do, and everybody is different, but you really do have to think about it. And you have to maybe you have to find a partner who wants to stay home all the time and take care of the kids.
I agree. I
Maybe,
do think I have a very supportive husband who is thankfully, works close to home and is there in a pinch. And I think that that is a lot is has allowed me to do a lot of what I do. And I think that that's a crucial point.
yeah. And that's important when you're choosing a partner, all of that, right?
Mhm.
Um, we only have a couple minutes left. So give us, websites or other platforms we can go to find out more about what you're doing and your work. And yeah.
So the best place to find me is my website, which is jacquelinefriedland.com. And since it's hard to spell, I'm going to spell it out. It's www.jacquelinefriedland.com. And that has information about my books, my upcoming events, where to find me on social media. I'm very active on Instagram. My handle is Jackie Friedland. And I hope everyone will go and check it out. I love meeting readers at events. And yeah, that's the
Yeah.
scoop.
Okay. So what's the next event for this book?
I'm doing an author talk on April 2nd in Scarsdale. I will be in New York City on April 8th, in back in Connecticut on April 9th. So there's a long list and it's all there on the website.
Okay, terrific. Great talking to you. And I've been talking to Jacqueline Friedland, and the title of the book is Counting Backwards. Thanks so much for being on the show today. Great talk.
Thank you for having me.
Joining me today is Nicole Conn, author of Descending Thirds. Inspired by her own mother, who is a classical trained pianist, filmmaker and author Nicole Conn decided to turn her attention from the big screen to pen Descending Thirds, a gripping book of ambition, betrayal, and the fragile line between art and integrity, set with the backdrop of classical music. While it's a work of fiction, the book is perfect for anyone who has ever chased a dream or questioned the price of success. The story takes readers deep into the human cost of greatness. This is a must-read page-turner with two shocking twists that will leave you breathless. Welcome to the show. Nice to have you on, Nicole.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. Thank you for having me.
All right, so we're not going to talk about the two shocking twists because we want to be left breathless, and right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a secret. We're just we'll I don't want to say gloss over it, but we're not going to be talking about that. But also, you are and you've been described as a visionary filmmaker, novelist, and storyteller whose work has redefined LGBTQ plus cinema. And most famous you are for your debut feature, Claire of the Moon, in 1992.
Yes.
So, I mean, you've done so many different things, different venues, film, writing, all of it. But let's talk about the novel and what it will do for us. You know, what is I sort of touched on it, but how is this going to affect us as readers when we read this book about Descending Thirds?
Well, I'm hoping it will affect you in a wonderful way in terms of just sort of the lush, epic, sweeping romance of the story. It sort of takes place throughout the world. It's from 1944 to 1975, and the backdrop is classical music, which for me is one of the most, incredible gifts that we've been given by the arts. But it's also very much thematically about what price, fame, and glory. So that's part of the piece that I think when you ask what will readers get from it, I think everybody's had a place in their life where they've been asked to compromise in ways that they didn't want to, but to do so would give them a step up in the corporate ladder, the artistic ladder, wherever you may be. That is thematically the main piece that you will feel.
Okay. And you talk about music, the power of music, right? That what it can do for it's transformative.
Absolutely.
And yeah, many of us have had that kind of an experience. It can heal, connect, reveal truth about our relationships. How does that do that? I mean,
well, it's interesting. In the book, I have this conversation between a couple of the characters. It's like, what really is music? It's nothing more than a matter of pitched notes strung together, but we all collectively feel it in pretty much the same way. It's sad, it's upbeat, it's this or that. And it's sort of like, what actually is music when you think of it? And how does it have a collective response to it? Do you understand what I'm saying? So it's one of those things that I think everybody should sort of explore in their own mind. What is music for them?
Well, when you say a collective response, I'm thinking about, we'll say, film, which is different because don't we bring whatever we have? Our filters are all different when we
Yes,
watch a film,
exactly.
right? And
Yes.
and our filters change. You see a movie when you're 20 and then you see it at 40 and it takes on a whole different meaning, right? But you're
Yeah.
saying with music, that's not quite the same thing.
Well, it is what I'm trying to say is it basically is interpretive collectively in pretty much the same way, although when you look at it and you define it, it's just literally a pitch of notes all strung together. How does that make us cry? How does that make us weep? How does that give us inspiration, that inspirational feeling inside our center core? I've had a love affair with music because of my mother being a classical pianist. From the very day that I was brought home from the hospital when I was born, she tossed me in the crib. My father had bought her a piano, which she hadn't had for several years, and she started playing. And from that moment forward, I've been completely exposed to the beauty and glory that is classical music. But I want to make sure that people don't think this is just a book about classical music. It takes place in that venue because of my love for it and because of my mother, but it also really is an incredible triangular love story. as well as going back to the themes of what price glory. The three main characters, Alexandra, Conrad, and Sebastian, are all based on the kind of type of artist there is. I'm based on, Alexandra is sort of based on me and my mother. We're both completely emotional and heart fueled, but we're technically not that strong. Sebastian has very little talent, but he is a packaging phenomena. He's gorgeous. He's like Heathcliff with his good looks. He basically makes people love classical music just because of who he is. And then the third character, Conrad, Sebastian's adopted brother, he's a genius savant who feels and breathes music, every minute of the day. And that's all that matters to him. He doesn't care if anybody likes his music or not, because all he feels is the passion of it driven from his genius. So those are sort of the three type of artists that, sort of exist in the world. And that's one of the things that I really love about the book, portraying those kinds of artists. And also, as I said, the thematic, what price glory, pretty much everybody can relate to that.
We're talking about classical music, and in the book, as you say, three types of characters. Would this also apply to not K-pop? Maybe that's the other,
Absolutely. It
yeah,
applies.
okay.
Look at reality stars. They're a packaged component of reality TV. They don't necessarily have any talent. They're just somehow they sparked their popularity somehow, and that's what they're living off of. So I think it's today more than ever the question of what price, because everybody wants to be famous and everybody wants to be rich and all that good stuff. What are they doing for that? What are they willing to do for that? And how do they live with themselves after?
Yeah. What are we doing for children who want to be engaged in music in the school systems when the schools are now cutting out music, theater, and art from their programs? What's that going to do for us?
It does nothing good for us.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like the arts have been being cut from school curriculum forever, even in my day and age. You'd want to go take an art class or a music class, and it would have been cut from, the budget. I think it's absolutely deplorable that we pay our teachers so little, and that we pay so little attention to what happens in our educational system, when that's the very foundation for which our children are supposed to learn and go out and make it in the world. So I'm right with you. It's horrifying, all the cuts to art and music.
I said in the beginning, LGBTQ cinema. Talk to us about that. Okay. Your work, as I said, and it's not just I who say it, but it has redefined LGBTQ cinema. How'd you do that? What'd you do?
Well, I did a film called Claire of the Moon way, way, way back when, in the 90s. And it had a 10th year re-release. It had a 20th year re-release. And we just now are basically restoring the actual 35 millimeter film format for our 35th year anniversary re-release. It sort of struck a nerve, I guess, in terms of dealing with being a lesbian, really straightforward, having those discussions inside the film. And so the film did really, really well. It, won kind of awards. It was one of the first films chosen for the Sundance Channel way back when. And then I ended up moving into writing. I had a 3-book deal, as I said, but my son, who's was born micropreemie at 100 days too early, weighing less than a pound. When he was born, I was doing a documentary about surrogacy, the surrogate who was carrying my son, Nicholas, and it turned completely into a documentary about what preemie babies go through and the advancements in technology, and should we be using this advancements in technology and all those sorts of things. And the film was called Little Man. Showtime picked it up and ran an Emmy campaign on it. It's still seen widely throughout the country in nursing schools and things along those lines, because there's no footage like it. I ended up shooting it right before the HIPAA privacy laws had been enacted. And so the footage in there shows literally what every one of these micropreemies ends up going through, because my son went through every complication there can be from being micropreemie.
And now your son is in his 20s.
Yes, he turned 23 March 15th, the day Descending Thirds was published, which is really lovely present all the way around.
And also, I think there are more preemies, micro preemies than ever before. Women are having children. This is another piece of it, I think, as
Later, yeah,
later.
which is
And
what my partner and I did.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. So how old were you?
Late 40s, and no, I'm more mid 40s for me, and my other partner was in her late 40s. So it was a definitely a we really want this child
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah. I was going
Our
to say
daughter,
you two are
yeah,
an old mom situation,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Our daughter had been born without any complications, which was
Uh-huh.
absolutely wonderful. But yes, he was the product of being exposed to severe preeclampsia from the surrogate. So that's what happened there. And after that film, I ended up basically doing a film called Elena Undone, which is about soulmates, and did hugely well in the LGBT community, and followed that up with a perfect ending. Elena Undone has the longest cinema kiss in cinema history, which I'm very proud of. Um, and many of my fans, and I hate to call them fans, they're more like, lovely viewers,
Yeah.
watch my films over and over and over again to heal with them. So I've been very, very blessed by that as well.
Was this a film that you would have in a NICU, for instance, or have available to parents?
Oh, Little
Uh,
Man, yes, is available
yeah.
through the website at NicoleConnFilmsGlobal.com. That is pretty much the only place you can get it right now is through my website.
I've spent with grandchildren, 4 or 5 weeks in the NICU. So I actually
I
understand.
love your thing in your bio that says all your wisdom comes from raising three sons. I love that because to me, I list myself as a writer, director, producer, and mother, but really mother is number one. That's
Yeah.
the number one gig I enjoy, and it's also the comes with the greatest rewards.
Yeah, it does. But you're right. That's kind of the framework for all the rest of the stuff, right? Everything else
Exactly
you
right.
do. Yeah, it
Yeah.
comes from that. Exactly. But I mean, it's just incredible work that you've done. And, this film, the 12 best documentary awards, right?
Yeah,
And
it did.
yeah,
Yeah, it did really, really well. I mean, it is not just because I made it. It's about what my son went through, and I think that is why it's so compelling. He is such an incredible teacher messenger in terms of that film. So many people, I had got letters like you cannot believe an army sergeant who hadn't cried in 20 years. He lost all these men, and he watched the documentary and just bawled his eyeballs out, things like that. And I think it's because you see this young little sort of, not even a human being
yeah,
born, because you look so different when your skin is gelatinous. You can literally see organs through that skin. It's amazing that they can save these babies. And part of the documentary is me asking myself, at what price am I saving my son?
yeah.
Over and over again, because um, I could have made different decisions, yet I literally couldn't make different decisions, if you know what I mean.
I do. And I see you look at these babies and you think, or you look at your baby and, they look like fetuses. I mean, and then you
Exactly.
think of how vulnerable. I think the word vulnerability comes up. What am I doing?
Absolutely.
Like I'm hurting, I'm helping, but I'm, feel like you're hurting them and they're intubated and, all the
Yes,
stuff that goes along
all
with
the
that.
stuff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's an emotional roller coaster
It
for,
really is. And
yeah.
the film is exactly like that, because you go through all the ups and downs of what he went through in his life for the first 2.5 years. And he was literally a NICU PICU baby for his first 5 years of life. We were always in the hospital for one reason or another, because, he was just so fragile, and medically, his immune system literally didn't exist because of that micro prematurity.
I think another thing, one of the issues, bringing your baby home after they've been in the NICU or PICU, it's terrifying. I think it's terrifying
Yeah,
for parents. Yeah,
we had a
yeah,
total. Nicholas still has 24/7 nursing because he requires line of sight care, meaning he has a seizure disorder. He was legally blind. We did double cataract surgery, so he doesn't have to wear glasses for the first time in his life. But it sort of comes with, you have to understand that if it's somebody who's severely medically fragile, you're coming home with a hospital. and you're running a hospital in your home, with the nurses that you have to get in there and hire, et cetera, as well as all of the medical equipment that's required for my son.
How did you handle when you did bring him? Yes, as you're describing it, when you bring him home and you and your partner, and each person deals with it somewhat differently. Like, how did that affect your relationship and the two of you in terms
We
of,
were
yeah,
we were on, it was horrifying because we had agreed if there was anything wrong, quote unquote, with our child, we would terminate. And they told us something was wrong, but they couldn't tell us what was wrong. And by that time, I felt my son's spirit. I felt him completely as he is, as I feel him today. And I finally had to look at myself. I'm a far left lesbian liberal who believes absolutely in choice. But I finally understood what these other women were going through and talking about because I felt the same exact way. There is life and spirit in my child, and you could put a gun to my head and I wouldn't be able to terminate him. So that's part of the question in the film. And then afterwards, how we both deal with the fact that we're living with a hospital. I love my ex, but it was too challenging for her to continue on after in his fifth year, we separated.
yeah.
And they have a wonderful relationship now, but it was just too much for her, as it is for many, many parents. That's one of the things. 95% of parents who go through something like this get divorced because it shines that light on you in a way that, makes your humanity, just vulnerable to every flaw there is known to mankind.
Yeah.
So,
Well, the whole family's you're vulnerable, your baby's vulnerable, the whole family's vulnerable, right? And
absolutely.
yeah, and
Absolutely.
I guess it's not really surprising that 95% of partners faced with a situation do get divorced or
Yes, it's
separate.
really, really
Yeah.
sad, but it does happen literally about that amount of time when I was doing all the research.
Do you think your film can um, help people, help partners? Maybe,
Absolutely,
yes, not,
absolutely. I think
yeah,
I think it's a cautionary tale for people, and it's also a tale that will help prepare somebody who is going to be going into the NICU. I've had many people way back when that would contact me and ask me questions about what they can feel in terms of their preparedness. So I ended up working with a woman who ran Preemie magazine, and we wrote a book for the preemie for the preemie world to how to save your insanity and create a new normal going through the NICU. So it's a very unique universe. It's by invitation only. And that's one of the reasons Little Man, the documentary, is so effective because you get to see what that world is that is by invitation only.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about, I'm not sure how these two connect, but now there's so much, people living longer and caregivers taking
Yep.
care of people with dementia and elderly people. And some of the same issues, I think, are right out there. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm dealing with that with my incredible mother, who was my, inspiration for this classical music background. She now, in 2014, she contracted a very weird, aggressive version of Parkinson's. And her passion is still the piano. She sits at that piano every day. And I've got to tell you, because during COVID, I was on the phone with her all the time. She's in Oregon. I'm down in Los Angeles. Um, it would break my heart to hear how she was playing and how many mistakes there were. That was a few years ago. Now she sits at the piano. She can barely put two phrases together, but she sits there and tries, you know, she has hallucinations. So she was saying to me, all the black keys are 2 inches higher than the white keys. She said, it's making it difficult for me to play, but she's still trying, and it's sort of like valiant and heartbreaking in the same breath. And I'm so glad that she's actually going to be able to see the book in print after 25 years of me trying to get this book out there. And that, she's one of the dedication to my mother, my son, and my daughter, who all played huge roles in the making of Descending Thirds.
You know, uh, it's heartbreaking for you. I think obviously you see your mother, I mean, and you've seen her decline.
Yeah.
One thing I think that sometimes the person themselves don't feel as, they still feel good, or they can feel. I mean, you're talking about her playing the piano. She still feel, her experience is a positive experience. She doesn't see herself in the same way that you do. I mean, it's painful for you to watch her, but not necessarily painful for her.
It is painful for her though, because
Oh,
she will say, I can't see
she's
the,
aware.
yeah,
And
she's
yeah,
like, oh, why can't I remember? Why can't I
yeah.
remember? That sort of thing. It's heartbreaking. But yes, the other part of her, where her core passion has always been for the piano, I think beyond us kids even, she's at that so that it feeds her soul. And I love that she does that. It's just like I said, heartbreaking for both of us. Um, and I'm just glad that she's still here to see the book being done. And in the audiobook, we're putting all these little pieces of music wherever I reference a piece from the repertoire so that the listener can hear the tone that was set for that. They'll hear 30 to 40 seconds of that piece of music. Um, and my mother's got like 4 or 5 different pieces from her earlier recordings set in the audiobook as well. So you know, uh, that's very satisfying for me to have that piece. Also, I wrote her as her own character inside the book. So, um, as a piano teacher that was helping Alexandra when she was young. So it's very cool that way to have her tied into everything so intimately.
So your mother and your son, very close.
Very, very, very. My son's love of classical music so inspires me from the beginning of time. From you'll remember the baby Einsteins that had all of the
Yes.
classical music.
Yep.
He would listen to that over and over till the fact that we had to get like 3 or 4 CDs of the same uh, composer, Mozart specifically, Chopin, Beethoven, Bach. Um, Loved them. And my daughter was in gestation when this book was in gestation. And during the pregnancy of my ex, um, I had the most creative burst that I'd ever had. And I basically wrote the script as an outline for Descending Thirds first during that time. And then it became the outline for the actual novel.
Well, you're an incredible woman. I mean, you just continue, I guess, to do incredible things. It's amazing. But I do want everybody to know, well, the book is Descending. We only have a couple minutes left. So the book is Descending Thirds. And I have been talking to Nicole Conn, the author of the book. And also a filmmaker, the film that we've been talking about. Tell us where we can access all of these,
You
actually
can
the book
access
as well. Yeah.
all of my work through NicoleConnFilmsGlobal.com. And there is a landing page with all of this stuff and a big, huge interview and the book trailer at descendingthirds.com.
Descendingthirds.com. Okay. Well, there's so much and to get in touch with you. Obviously, this was great. Yeah, I mean,
Thank you so much, Kathryn.
yeah,
Super
it's been
appreciate
great.
it.
Yes, thank you, and good luck with the book. And I really appreciate it. So do the listeners. Thank you.